Hello, happy season finale. How exciting is that?
Yeah, yeah, it's wild. There's so many things coming to an end. Even like my hockey is my last skates on Friday tomorrow, so it feels like it's so strange to be nearing into another transition of like summer and warmth and all those things. And
Question, is
um,
it coming to an end because the outdoor, it's just getting too warm for outdoor, or do you do indoor and they close the arena? Is it an arena? Is it a stadium? What do they call
yeah, it's a rink, a hockey rink. Yeah, yeah. Um, I could still play, but I shift the way I like to run in the summer, get more outside and do things like that.
it?
How was
Yes.
your re-entrance into Canada?
Oh, yes. First time back in Canada in 4 months. Just arrived yesterday, and it's cold. I think it's Canadian warm. It's really sunny here in Toronto. And I think it's actually going up to like 22 degrees. But 22 degrees here is a little bit different than 22 degrees Guatemala, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
A little bit cooler. But I
yeah,
actually went for my first run of the year yesterday, right after my flight. I was like, let's go for a little bit of a run and trying to get reacquainted to the city. And it was really nice. It's nice to be back.
yeah,
It's nice to um have clean running water and a full fridge because I'm with my parents right now.
yeah,
It's really nice.
yeah. And I imagine last we had chatted as we were prepping for today, I think you were expressing some moderate concern, maybe we'll say, to your friend in your house that was massive. And so I was glad to see that you made it out alive and your spider friend didn't get you.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I think there was a quote, I think it was like by Robert Downey Jr. and he was like, you can adapt to anything after 2 weeks. And I think that's true. Like just the fact that there was this huge spider, I think after about the 2 week mark, I was like, he's a friend, not a foe. That's the only way I could really deal with it. But he was so big that you couldn't even kill him without it being like a murder scene. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, we're just gonna leave it. It's just he's a friend. He's my little pet. I have a dog here in Toronto and I have a spider in Guatemala.
Well, I mean, it's funny that I don't know if it was purpose or not, but even like talking about adapting to like the environment and how to like reframe your perspective of something. I think it like probably lends itself really nicely to what we're going to be chatting about today.
Really well today, actually. I didn't as I was speaking, it was not making that connection, but I'm glad you did because it works perfectly. Yes, today we are talking about adapting specifically to a work environment, maybe less so with spiders in your house. But I think this will be really great. I had a really brief opportunity to chat with our two guests earlier, and Jesse, I know that you are obviously well acquainted with them. But we have, I'll do our little intros. We have Brianna Orr Stratton, who is the founder and CEO of Denova, a Nova Scotia-based biotech company creating sustainable protein for the global agriculture industry. And she has a background spanning oil and gas, investment, and deep tech entrepreneurship. She blends business and innovation to drive meaningful change. Brianna, it's so lovely to have you.
Hi, thank you so much
Hi,
for having me. Excited
of
for the
course.
conversation.
So excited. And we'll also introduce Andrew Soren, who is the founder and CEO of I should sorry, Eudaimonic. Is that how I'm pronouncing it? Is that correct? I think so.
Perfect. Yeah, you nailed it.
Thank you. I'm so sorry about that. By Design, a global network helping organizations build cultures of well-being and human potential. Based in Halifax, Andrew brings over 25 years of experience in leadership development and teaches at UPenn's Master of Applied Positive Psychology program. Welcome to you, Andrew, as well.
It's great to be here. Thank you both.
Oh, of course. Now, before we get into, I guess, like the actual questions that we have and the whole structure of it all, tell me what's top of mind. I obviously have been adapting to spiders and getting back to Toronto. Anything that you've been adapting to lately, Andrew, maybe?
Oh my God, there's so many things in the world to be adapting to. I feel like that I'm adapting to the constantness of having to adapt. That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, good one. It sounds kind of constantly stressful, but I think we'll probably get into that a little bit more. And Brianna?
Yeah, I like that. I'm adapting to adapting. Nice change. Uh, no better way to tee up the conversation. Adapting, I think I'm a parent of three children that are 6 and under. And so every day you're adapting to how they wake up, how they show up, what's going on, where they're growing. what they're doing, what their feelings are. So yeah, it's a minute by minute adapting and just hoping to show up in the best way I can for them. So that's top of mind all day, every day.
Yeah, it makes me think of, in terms of the conversation today, something that I felt both in relation to the work I get to do as well as personally experiencing. I think it's an interesting question because I think there's a way in which we can adapt to circumstances where it's almost like happening to us. And then I think there's also a way in which we can be intentional while also flexible to those changing circumstances. 'Cause, like you, I've got 3 kids, and there's some days like, but yesterday this was the most favorite thing you've ever experienced in the whole world, and today you're throwing it at me. I don't understand what's happening. I'm having my brain units are not computing what's going on. So when I think about this work, I think there's stuff you can do to improve your ability to adapt. Like say, for example, we exercise to kind of break down our metabolic system so that it can be more resilient to change, and as like a basic example. While also we have limitations to how much we can adapt. And so I'm really interested to see within our conversation today, where we have, expertise in very deep expertise in multiple ways, where a person starting up a massive startup to try and make this thing work, and then a person who helps these folks work through all this kind of changing environments. And so I'm really curious to see where we go. And I guess with that, to lead us off, but maybe Andrew, I'll let you lead it, and Bree, I'd love to see how you follow up to this. Is when you think about adaptability, I'm really curious to how you define it and why you think it's important and even matters as a leader.
Well, I'll start by saying that the folks listening to this podcast or this webinar should know that I think a lot like an academic. I kind of think of myself as a bit of a pracademic. So some of the things I'm going to talk about are within kind of the ways that these things might be thought of specifically from a psychological perspective. But I'm really interested in how do we take psychology and apply it in organizational context. So adaptability, I think that if you're looking at definitions of adaptability in the literature, the first thing you'd find is a huge number of different ways of thinking about adaptability. It's actually not one of those things that's really all that well defined. But when people talk about it, I think that they're talking about our capacity to be flexible, to be agile, to be able to pivot, which, in this moment, as I said before, it feels like there's a lot of pivoting and agility and flexibility required in the world. I think that the people who look and think about adaptability would probably say it's pretty core to how we've evolved and even been able to survive as a species. So just even from like
Yeah.
an evolutionary psychology perspective, right? Our lives are in so many ways about being able to adapt at the individual level, in relationships and teams, maybe even in our communities or society more broadly. I think that probably most importantly, when people talk about adaptability, they often talk about it in the context of how do we be resilient? How do we
Mm,
how do we bounce back better by
mm,
being adaptable? And I think that kind of the last thing that I would say is like the mechanisms for doing that are really pretty psychological. Like they're how we think about things, they're our mindsets, and there are beliefs. And specifically the mindset that would probably be the most important one is it's one around growth. And how we think about our capacity to change. And then from a beliefs perspective, it's really how we explain things that happen to us, both good
mm.
things and bad things. And I think that all of those things probably feed into what do we mean by adaptability?
Yeah, it makes me think. I've been listening and following some of Lisa Barrett Feldman's work recently, like one of the leading neuroscientists, and she talks to what you were indicating there about much of our stuff is our brains predicting what might happen, and they even gave the example of like her telling a story that, and I could almost picture it where I was like predicting the word that was going to come, and it's like if we change the word that you're expecting, all of a sudden your brain is like, wait a second, what happened there? And so, we forget that we do have a whole bunch of predictions happening almost unconsciously all the time. And adaptability to me is one of those moments where perhaps that predictive error is like quite significant, that all of a sudden, has almost like that jarring e-brake effect in a car. Bree, what about you? When you think about, what Andrew said, or even as you're preparing for the question, being a CEO, as you mentioned, a mother, how do you look at adaptability and why it's critical as a leader?
Yeah, it's definitely the word resilience jumps out right away. It's just continuing to be standing and move forward. I would say I liked what Andrew said there about how you take that and you kind of learn from it and you get better. And one of the sayings that we have around here that we picked up was we always think like we're going to get through this hurdle or get through this obstacle, and then it's going to get easier. And we stop saying that. You just get better at doing hard stuff. Like it's just
Mm,
more hard and more hard. So that resiliency of how you just keep getting better, and the things that seemed hard before or challenging before are less hard, but there's just new hard. But I will say, like in our space, so like we're still a pre-revenue company. You know, we're not necessarily like early stage startup. We're a little bit more advanced in that, working towards being in market in the next year or two. But we're also building an innovation and a technology, and quite frankly, an industry to Canada that hasn't been here before. So when you're creating a future level possibility, you're just constantly in change or influx, and you're just trying to make the best decision in that moment with the information you have in that moment. So I think for me, adaptability is also, again, this kind of duality of remaining committed, remaining focused, making decisions with the information that you have, but at all points in time, being ready and open to possibility information to then shift.
mm,
Adaptability is being able to have that flex in that
mm,
space and in that, and just that kind of becomes the normal. Um,
mm.
so I think that lands, and I mean, if you link it back to parenthood, like, parenthood for me and being a mother is the greatest leadership journey I've ever been on. No
Yes.
question, right? So I think if you can take a pause and you see that, I mean, the mirror and model you, and take those lessons and how you want to show up, and living in constant flux in that space, you get pretty good practice about having to deal with what's coming at you.
Yeah, and I know we'll talk more about like uncertainty, but just with what you said there, it sounds when you're embarking on new territory, you could create a bunch of uncertainty. And I'm curious, how do you stay like tethered almost, or how do you stay grounded? Because I would imagine, and we know this from psychology work, that when uncertainty happens, it can be really challenging for humans. And we also, in that predictive element I just spoke to, we make more gross errors in turn because we're trying to just survive the circumstances. So how do you manage that, like as a leader, to like hold that steadiness while openness to new possibility?
Yeah, I think the key part that we practice here is working back from the future. So like, some people call it vision, like that part of it, but really anchoring in that. And even at times when it feels that things didn't go as planned, or you have a failure and a breakdown in a certain area, or you didn't get the financing that you wanted, or we didn't get the breakthrough in the technology that you wanted. And it can have those moments of like, oh gosh, where do we go next? I think for me, when I get grounded and calm at an individual level, and then having those committed conversations with my team, is you go right back to where are we supposed to be. And that hasn't changed, that anchoring commitment of wanting to deliver, a really responsible ingredient to change the way that we manufacture and have stable supply chains and have a healthy food system. None of that commitment has changed. So anchoring there, where do we need to be, when do we need to be in market, and then literally working back step by step. And when you change your vantage point from where you are and looking out to where you are in the future and looking back, suddenly there's 100 possibilities of how to get there instead of
Mm,
the one path that you're on. So it completely changes the angle or funnel that you look at from it. So anchoring in that and then going back, so then you're constant. One of our values here is actually living in possibility, so that you're actually constantly thinking about what's possible while you're in that space, and looking from the future back, and then creating your pathway to get to this envisioned future that you want. So I think
mm,
that's really helpful to know that you're in this constant possible space of flux, but then you have to be committed, focused, aligned, and then continuously speak through how you get to the end game.
mm. I think that's real insightful. Like it's speaking to maintain what's important and recognize the way in which you live up to what's important might be different as new information comes along. Yeah, I think that's really really critical. Andrew, when you're working with leaders, I'm wondering, what do you see as some of the biggest struggles that gets in the way, or even prevents folks from staying adaptable as a leader?
Just even listening to Brianna, you describe that capacity to be able to think about the future and wrestle with what's in the moment and play that balance. I think that the biggest struggle that so often I encounter with leaders is just the capacity to have a moment to make sense of it all. Like that, it requires
Mm,
a huge feat to be able to stop
Mm,
especially when things feel like they're piling on and you need to make decisions and it feels rapid and there's lots of change. I have a former colleague whose name is Dove Seidman who liked to talk about how when you press pause on a machine, it stops, but when you press pause on a human being, it starts. Like the pause button is our capacity to like reflect and reconnect and
mm,
reimagine. And it's so counterintuitive to try to figure out in the moment of chaos, right? In the moment of volatility and uncertainty and just I don't like, how do you press pause then? Like how do you press pause in stride to just take that breath before you move forward? And I
mm,
think it's the easiest thing to do and it's the hardest thing to do all in the same moment.
I think it's a really insightful piece because I could see it's actually you almost need to short circuit your own brain to not react to whatever the stimulus is because it can trigger like this need to fight or flight or whatever, but to pause allows you to at least the opportunity to have your thoughts catch up to some action because I agree. I see that so often where in 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 seeking to solve one problem where we're perhaps more focused on getting out of pain than moving towards that north or that lighthouse that Brie alluded to, we actually create a whole new pile of pain somewhere different that actually continues to take us further off course. Um, in that, and even as Bree articulated this, like focus on that true north. To me, something that percolates a little bit is the concept of trust, and which is such a huge concept. And I'd be curious for you, Andrew, when you look at it through that lens of psychology, how does trust play a role in our ability or even the concept of adaptability?
Yeah.
Like what is the relationship that exists there?
Brianna, and you and I were having a pre-chat, and I think that we all completely agreed that trust is everything. Like it's literally everything, especially in our capacity to be able to move forward in moments of uncertainty. And I think in that we have to think about, well, again, what do we mean by trust? Just as we have to try to figure out what do we mean by something like adaptability. It's funny. I have another friend. I'm going to quote people. I like quoting people. So
Yeah, me
another
too.
friend of mine, her name is Mo McKenna. Mo likes to say, for common sense words, you have to make sense of them as a commons. Right. So, like something like trust, we all completely know and agree what trust is, except like people, if you ask two people about what trust is, they'll probably give you pretty different answers. And there's often two camps of people who will think about trust. There's the people who think about earning trust, and there's the
Mm,
people who think about extending trust. And earning trust is all about like, am I consistent? Am I clear? Have I done something in the past? Has my past behavior proven that I am trustworthy? Right? Which is all really important, and we need to be able to do those things. But the extension of trust is actually the thing that in philosophy would be considered the virtue. And
mm,
that's true because it's really hard to take a leap and trust somebody else. I mean, just think about the idea of a trust fall, if you've ever done that, right? Where you're closing your eyes and you're like falling back and you're hoping somebody's going to catch you, right? Like that's a huge leap of vulnerability. And that's the kind of trust that actually takes risk. But it's like anything in business, you can't actually have reward without taking risk. Like it's a
mm,
necessary part of the balance sheet. It's really important. And so yeah, so I think that for the kind of adaptability that we're talking about here, our capacity to collectively extend trust to one another is what I think I mean by it's everything.
mm, mm. It almost sounds like too. It's almost like giving the benefit of the doubt and room to acknowledge that it's possible that we might get something wrong or we might get something right, and that doesn't mean you're a piece of garbage or you're this horrible person who's out to get me. It might just mean I misunderstood or I didn't have the skill set required. And I'm thinking practically within because I suspect this gets taxed and even challenged all the time, Brianna, in your work. And I'm wondering if there's moments that you'd share around like how greater or lesser trust like shows up and impacting the team's ability to adapt through such changing circumstances that you've had to navigate.
Yeah, well, I will say that even through like the last 8 years of going through this with a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty, highs and lows, all of it. The hardest times and like the times that have kept me up the most have typically been around relationships. So the biggest breakdowns have been when trust is lost or trust is compromised. And those are the hardest things to navigate. And when you're trying to go so quickly and do things so fast and so intentionally, when there's not trust in there, then you can't do it all at once and you can't do it by yourself. So it's just a massive challenge when it's lacking, to be able to move forward, to build the culture that you want, to create a high performing team. All of that is so based upon trusting each other and knowing that your teammates got your back and that they're going to do the best job that they can within that. So unquestionably, it's critical. And I've lived through when that trust goes away. And it's a icky place to be in. For sure. But I will say that one of the sayings that we have at our company as well is, when we talk about failures, we call them breakdowns. So we are saying here is breakdowns make breakthroughs. And so that's really trying to create trust in, we expect you to make mistakes. We expect the experiments in the lab to go wrong. We expect the pilot plant to break down. We expect all of these things to happen. We don't expect to get it right. We expect to get rejected in financing, but we also expect that in each of those moments, we get a breakthrough. What do we learn from it? Bad data is good data. And taking all that space, and so that again, we get better. That adaptability piece, we're constantly getting better. We're constantly iterating on ourselves and on our research and on our innovation and on our business plan. Business plan is so much better today than it was before. It's because we're learning constantly. So I think it's trying to instill trust in each individual and their task empowers them to be more creative, to see more possibilities, to be more fearless within it, knowing that you're not going to, we're expecting breakdowns, but from that, where's the breakthrough? And then how do we get better from it? So I think trust is really paramount in your relationships, but also in each person's relationship with themselves and with the work that they're doing, because we're instilling that trust throughout the organization, that we expect them to do a great job to the best of their ability, and we're also expecting you to learn when it's not going the way it's supposed to. So that's like a really key piece for us, and I think, and that's important in a company like ours where we're working on innovation constantly. So again, in the unknown. And so we just have to trust that you're going to get there. We're going to get there. And if we're values aligned, and we're committed to the same end game, let's just keep going.
Yeah, what I'm hearing in that, when it breaks down, it sounds as if you end up having to focus on, I'll use the term like emotional problems that you're maybe trying to implement intellectual solutions to, that are just going to further exacerbate like the issues. And so you actually are diverting energy, resource, all of this stuff to actually solving the issue that might be threatening the business, to have to now navigate something different. And so you can see how it can be quite debilitating, not only in an organization like yourself, but any organization for that matter. And, Andrew, I'd be curious if you had something off the top of your mind as to like, one or two critical factors that you've noticed that would increase or decrease trust, like in those moments where you're dealing with uncertainty. And as you said, to pre-frame, like you search trust definition online, you'll get thousands of answers and thousands of factors that influence it. But does anything jump out to you as like, these are ones that I notice become real critical detractors or even investments into trust?
There's something there's something I just want to pull out of Brianna, your story there, because I think that it's like such a good example of something that I said at the very beginning around the right kind of mindsets that we need to have around something like adaptability. And so this notion of breakdown as a breakthrough is like such a brilliant way of talking about what a growth mindset is. So there's this huge body of research at this point out there about the different kind of mindsets that we need for success, for resilience, for adaptability. And Carol Dweck, who's kind of the mother of a lot of this research, would say that of the mindsets that are out there, and mindsets are kind of like primordial beliefs that we have about each other and ourselves. One of the most important kind of beliefs that we can have is our capacity to grow versus our capacity to be fixed, right? So fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And the problem with a fixed mindset is that if something bad happens, if that breakdown happens, it's your fault. And you're stuck there, right? Like bad crap is happening and bad crap is always going to happen. And bad crap is probably going to happen because I suck, right? Like a failure is a failure of you versus if you have a growth mindset, that breakdown can become a breakthrough because it's about, okay, I fail forward, right? Like this thing sucked, but maybe there's something that I can learn from it and try in a different way. And just even having that fundamental mindset shifts everything. It allows you to be able to see failures as real opportunities to learn and to grow and to shift. It allows you to be able to be confronted with a barrier and be like, okay, great. This barrier doesn't mean I can't move forward. I just have to get much more creative route and going
Mm,
down, below, or up, above, or way around, or take something and smash through it. Like you get to be much more innovative and creative, and you get to be able to team in way better ways if you're constantly thinking, hey, we can all adapt and grow together. That is a fundamental mindset that you're holding.
mm. Yeah, as you were saying there, just it reminded me of like even some of the personal shifts I feel like I've been working through on that, like where failure, mistakes were like detrimental to me, like at my core. So I had this expectation that we should always be, almost perfect versus excellent. And, anything that was different, which created some funkiness on like acknowledging and repairing effectively and all. And again, you end up moving further away in those moments, but that shift to that growth mindset is a willingness to accept and looking as like, hey, this is new information. It allows me to move better towards the thing I really care about, versus hold something different. And Bree, as you're describing your work and Andrew's kind of prefacing some of the academic elements, I'm sitting here also thinking and knowing adaptability is where we're just like evolving to the environment around us, to which humans are really, really great at. You said that, Andrew. And intentional change though requires resource. You have to like battle these things to work against kind of our innate desires in many ways. And to me, that can be really exhausting, very exhausting. And now we're only talking about the work context, let alone, when you show up to your three children and they're wanting something different, like, and you have no battery left. I don't even know what we do then. Like, I haven't figured it out. And so I'm wondering again in those moments, like, how do you stay grounded and resilient when things are overwhelming while also recognizing you're a finite resource? Like we sometimes tell ourselves, I'm sure those on the call can appreciate that we have this story of like we're infinite capacity and we can do things forever and ever and ever and ever. No matter how strong and resilient you are, eventually we're going to need to rest and stop. So how do you hold that string of, you talk about keep taking a step forward while also acknowledging your humanity, that it's not infinite. Do you have any insights or thoughts on that for us?
Yeah, I don't know if I have insights totally, but I can share. I have like just appreciating the conversation so much and just have want to riff off of a lot of what you guys are saying. But I would say actually, and it plays off of something Andrew said there related to kind of how you stay grounded or calm within the overwhelming component. That really resonated and I think has been a key part of the success of being able to move through maintain resilience. And that's detaching who I am and myself from the business and from the success of it. So what you said there, Andrew, about that like identity that comes through, like there's a failure in the business, it's me, it's my fault, and like getting so emotional. So the exhausting part comes like because emotions are big and heavy and feelings can be big and heavy, and that's where a lot of the weight is. Certainly we get tired if you're working a late night or you're working a long day, but a lot of the weight and exhaustion that I've experienced again comes in managing the relationships and is everybody cared for. Like the heavy work is the emotional work, and if you can at least detach yourself from it. And I think that's one thing that I've been able to do and would definitely recommend to any of the kind of founders or peers that I speak with is you aren't your business. A lot of people say, oh, your business is your baby. No, that's not my baby. I have 3 babies at home. Those are my babies. And so I think that detachment is so important so that when there's a failure, I'm looking at it. I am not it. So then I can look at it in a way that I can see the possibilities. I can see what's there. It's broken. How can we fix it? There's 5 ways to fix it, rather than being stuck, as you said, Angie, you get stuck in yourself, or I'm wrong and it's my fault. And just I would say you had like a pretty active sport background as well. But one thing that I have seen, and it's a little different in some of the different generations that are now part of our team, but is this resilience or the anti-fragility narrative that's going around. And a big piece of that, playing competitive sport, played basketball my whole life, played in university at UFC and at Dal. And like I grew up from day one taking feedback. So you're getting criticism all the time. If my identity and who I was tied to all of the things I was told wrong that I was doing, or I could
Yeah.
choose to take that information and get better. Then you're like, it was almost like flexing that muscle my entire life, unknowingly chasing a ball, that you create that separation. So I think that is really key to staying calm. And yes, it's exhausting. Can't say I figured out how to necessarily fully hold balance across all categories. I think you got to make choices, do them consciously. But what I would say is to like be able to defer some of that, so you're not taking all that energy in, and then you have more juice to give to the solution. You have more juice to give to other people, because I'm not woe is me, this is my fault. If my company didn't hit its potential, I'm satisfied with where it's at. I'm not satisfied with where we're going yet, but I certainly feel proud of what it's done, and it wouldn't be a failure upon me. It would be, I know that I've done everything that I can possibly to make it as great, to the greatest potential. And you can see more when you're not so attached to it. So Andrew, I totally resonate with that. And I think that is a secret sauce. I'm not my business. I'm creating something extraordinary with other people. And that allows that energy, that well, to stay more full, because it's not being lost on myself.
Yeah, I think it's really insightful because, when I think about those dynamics as a leader, just as a parent, it's like you're not only responsible for dealing with our own shit, you also are responsible and have some influence on the shit of everyone else around you. And that can be really, like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing here. And, what you're saying there is essentially, how do I show resilience while also being vulnerable and not pretending I have all the answers? And that detachment is a really interesting perspective. And I'm curious for you, Andrew, is there anything else you would add to that? Because I think it's a real struggle that I see, because I haven't come across a leader, particularly senior leaders, not to let's say they're better or worse, but that deeply care about the people and the organization, and also struggle to like manage it all. So like, how do we hold that, like, where you're not creating a false sense of like, I'm Superman or Superwoman, and also not dumping all of my emotional baggage on everyone around me? Like, how do we, is there anything else that you would say is it can help with that?
Hmm. Um, yeah. So there's something that'll go even further, because I think just staying on this theme of what are the stories that we tell ourselves is really, really important. And I also kind of love the fact that both of you are talking about little kids, because I think this is especially true when you listen to the talk track of little kids, and senior executives are little kids too. Like we're all
We're
like
all little
we've
kids.
all been there, and in some ways we are all still there in our heads. And so it can be really helpful just to think about how we listen to the talk track. And so people who have this kind of growth mindset, and you even just heard again, Bree, you just kind of did it right now as you were talking. There's this companion thing which is called explanatory style, or how we explain things to ourselves. And the guy who's probably most famous for studying optimism, this idea of like, how do we maintain optimism and forward momentum, is a guy named Martin Seligman. And I get to teach with him at University of Pennsylvania. And he has spent most of his career trying to understand, first, why do people give up? And so his actual first big breakthrough was this whole idea of kind of learned helplessness and why do we give up in these kinds of contexts. But there was something always really confounding in his research, which was about a third of the people, like most people, gave up when unpredictable things came and hit them, and they didn't feel like there was any way to control the situation. But there was always about a third of the people who didn't give up. And so he started to get really curious about like what's going on there. Like they're confounding his experiment. So he was like, what's going on with that third? And the third of the people who didn't give up explained bad things differently to themselves. So when a bad thing happened, they thought, okay, it's not just me, right? Just as you guys were saying, it's not just me. Other people are involved in the situation. Like personal, not just me. They were also like, it's not everything. Like this bad thing happened, but there are other things that contributed to it happening. And like it's kind of an isolated situation here. So it's not kind of pervasive. It's just this thing. And it's also not permanent. Like this bad thing happened, but it's not like bad shit always happens to me. It's just like this bad thing happened. Like this breakdown happened. It's
Mm,
not everything that's a disaster. It's not me that's responsible for it. It's not me. It's not always. It's not everything. And that, like that language, if you start listening for the me always everything in people's language, whether you're talking to an executive, whether you're talking to a direct report, whether
yeah.
you're talking to a child, you'll start hearing that language pop up everywhere. And you can really tell the difference between people who see like it's my fault, bad things always happen, and it's everything I touch, versus, yeah, no, not like I totally played a part, but not just me, not always,
Mm,
not everything.
that's really insightful. Oh yeah, go
Actually.
ahead, Liv.
Yeah, because I've it's interesting to talk about the internal dialogue, because I have some friends or some colleagues that I've come across where I can really hear that negative or that all about me, I'm the issue kind of dialogue. But I think it's probably hard for people to identify it in themselves. And
Totally.
one of the techniques I'd heard, and I'd love your feedback on this, is to actually like record yourself talking about a problem, and then listening back to kind of see it from that third perspective. And I'm wondering if that's something that you would advise.
Yeah, I think it's a really great idea. It's also like a really phenomenal way to use journaling if you do that, or just have like invite. I mean, it's the reason why so many people have coaches, right? Like it is really hard to be able to see ourselves, and it can be really helpful to have somebody else hold the mirror up. So any opportunity that you get that you get to have a bit of meta reflection, whether it's about recording yourself, writing something down, revisiting it, it goes back to that pause, right? But it can also be so important to be able to ask for that feedback from other people, especially trusted advisors who are in your life.
Mm.
Yeah, I love that. And I think like for me, what I strive to do with our group, and I imagine you're real similar, and just why we get on is not necessarily judging the what's happening, but reflecting it back and be like, so this is what happened. Does it align to who we want to be? And if it didn't, how do we correct? And if it and or do we need to reset, who do we want to be? And that's okay too. Like all of it's okay. But let's be clear that we still made a choice to move in this way or that way. And now we get to make a new choice. Do we want to move back towards or continue to move in this other direction? And I think that's so critical to consider. Um, and I think I wonder, like, for Bria, maybe I'll start this one with you. Like, even that frame, I feel can be really helpful to consider when we're really stuck in a scenario where, because there can be some situations where there isn't a clear right or wrong. And I actually almost, to be honest, believe that in most scenarios, there isn't a clear pathway. There is always a pathway with benefits and consequences. And it's a matter of like, how do we then choose? And I'm wondering, like, when you're in that scenario, because I can't imagine you haven't been, how do you approach making those real hard choices when there isn't a clear pathway, but and we'll also want to figure out what's best for you or your collective? Like, how do you approach those scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, definitely most are in that case, and I think the key part is just not doing it in a vacuum. There's a comment in there in the chat that said it's good to learn from your employees to grow as a leader. Like, absolutely. I think that's is the way that you make decisions and can take hard decisions. And it's just to listen, ask questions, and don't think that you know all
Mm,
the answers. And if there's gaps, I'm really fortunate to have a great village at home, but also a really great village around me in my professional life and at the company, whether it's my core team and my management team, who I'm learning from constantly, or my board of directors or the advisors around me. And anytime there's a gap, it's trying to reach out and ask questions and be curious. So you just be curious to see where you can find the gaps and gather as much information as possible. But one thing I've also learned is to not get paralyzed about not making a decision. Like really early on, actually, when I was choosing what university to go to for my undergrad, and it's a lesson that stuck with me forever, and it's from my dad. And I was trying to coming on. I was recruited to a couple of places, and should I go? I ended up choosing to go to University of Calgary. It was so far away from home. What if it doesn't work out? It's such a big leap. And he just said to me, "Well, you can always change your mind." And it was kind of like, well, of course I can always change my mind. But to like really hear that, okay, well, of course I could change my mind. Worst case scenario, sure, I have to move, I have to transfer back. But yeah, of course, there's a possibility. It's like the world doesn't stop. I'm not dead. I'm not ever going to not play basketball or go to school again. So I think I've taken that mindset also, that sometimes you just have to take a decision. You try to, bring as much information from people that know more than you do around those decisions. Don't do it in a vacuum. Lean on those advisors, lean on your network, get curious, ask, but then at some point you have to take a decision with the information you have. Trust that it's going to be the best one in that moment, and then be okay if you have to change your mind once you get more information, if it's 10 minutes later, or if it's 2 months later, or if it's 2 years later. So I think that allows you to progress and move forward, know that it's good enough in the moment, and then being ready again to adapt, be ready for possibility, be ready for change.
I think that really speaks to that. Really works well when you are disconnected in the identity you mentioned earlier, where I can see, and I see it happen, where you see folks get frozen because it is the what if this fails, or what if I get it wrong. And I love that. What if you do? And I think it sounds casual and flippant, but it's such a good, insightful point. Because yeah, what if you do? And I remember even working with some folks and actually saying, okay, in that situation, write down all of the possible worst things that could ever happen to you. And it's fascinating when they do that, even themselves, you start to go, all right, that's silly. And you can even then also write down, what could I do to stop it? And if it did happen, how would I recover? And you realize, I'll still be okay. It will look different, but I'll still be okay. And I think it's such an insightful piece. And, I think in the uncertainty that we're talking about, in the wanting to create adaptability, Andrew, before we jump into our open up to questions to the audience, I wonder if you could help me with one thing is how do you guide a team of people through that? Even what Brianna's talking about, how do we guide people through that? And how do we keep those people adaptable, focused, and motivated and engaged? Is there anything you can help, as you're trying to corral and maybe, influence that direction as a leader?
I think that there's two really important pieces of what you just articulated, which is how do we start as a team, and then how do we keep going as a team in that. And I think the start is totally all about a why. Right? We need a sense of purpose. We need a big overarching, like a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal,
Yeah, I
right?
love it.
Brianna, everything that I've heard you talk about your company, it's like there's a BHAG there. There's a reason why you guys are doing this, and why you've been doing it for 8 years, and why every breakdown is an opportunity and a need to have a breakthrough, because it's so important that you figure out how to do this and that you get it right. And that kind of galvanizing force is so important, right? Think back to JFK and putting a man on the moon, right? This idea of how do we have a sense of purpose that drives people, that brings people together, that allows the janitor who's working at NASA to be able to see his role as trying to figure out, how do I have to keep this place clean so that we can put a man on the moon, right? That idea of having a central galvanizing purpose as an organization is really clear. And it doesn't need to be that big. It can be really small. We can find purpose in so many different ways. I mean, purpose can be about building mastery and competence. It can be about kinship and the people that we're happy that we're being with. It can be about service to others. It can be about passion, right? It can be about even utility, right? Sometimes a really great reason to show up to work is so that we can get a paycheck, so that we can live the life that we want to live at home. And that can be a real shared purpose too, right? Adversity can be a shared purpose. There's all sorts of different reasons why we want to get out of bed and show up as a team, but spending time talking about it, and not just saying it, but talking about it as a team, as a group, no matter how big or small your group is so important. And it's something that we so often miss. We just don't spend that pause time talking about why are we here and why is that important. And so I think that's the first and most important thing. And then the second thing is just how do you keep talking about it? That's not a one and done conversation, right? We're going to keep them back. We're going to keep talking about it. We're going to keep exploring it. When the breakdown happens, let's remember why we're here so that we can go for the breakthrough. That just feels like it's a necessary part of the equation.
Yeah, I like that, because you get to then choose when situations arise. Does this move us closer or further away? And if we're deciding that, it does move us further away, we're making that choice again intentionally, and we're okay with the consequences of that, or the reasons in which why that's occurring. And the other thing I love about what you just said with purpose, for me, is it doesn't create an illusion that things are going to be easy and comfortable and joyous all the
I
time.
know.
Like
Purpose
like
sucks
it,
sometimes, right? Like
it does. It
it's
does.
really freaking hard.
I had a conversation with my 5-year-old the other day about it actually when um, she did not want to put on her snow pants. And then she even actually had said, like, I think everyone hates me. And I was like, oh, interesting. Like, tell me more. And she shared why. And it had to do with like me being, direct about putting snow pants on and not allowing the opportunity for her not wear snow pants. I said, well, would you be curious to why? And she's like, yeah. I was like, I love you so much that I'm prepared to do this thing I do not want to do and have a debate with you about putting snow pants on. It is the only reason why, because I know we need to keep you safe. I know it's going to be snowy, all these other things. And even in that conversation you saw with this 5-year-old, like her brain kind of flipped a little bit as to, oh, this action is a caring action, not a rejection or action. Which again, understandably, if I'm being more direct, you could see why you would take it that way. And it wasn't without the conversation that we didn't get to that place. But for sure that was not an easy an easy moment in time when trying to navigate that. But Liv, what do we have in the questions? I want to shift to some of that and allow folks to present their thoughts to these deeply insightful guests we've got today.
Yeah, well, great one here. Asking, can you offer suggestions for working with or reporting to managers who are micromanaging perfectionists and the resulting overwhelming feelings of being a failure trying to work beneath them? This person's really trying to say positive and resilient, but I can imagine it's a bit difficult. I feel like both of you can probably offer some insight. Brianna, do you want to take a try at it first and then Andrew?
Yeah, I'm reading that and like self-reflecting because I definitely, I'm not a micromanager. I would lead my relationships with, Andrew, I like your definition around trust, like extending trust. That's like the place that I typically come from. But I definitely have a level of perfectionism that I've had to manage. And I see it in my 6-year-old. My husband always looks at me and he's like, yeah, that's for you to figure out. So just helping him turn it to a superpower and not something that can be quite paralyzing. So I'm like reading that question like, oh man, how would it be working for me? Jeez. But I do actually I don't necessarily know how to fully give advice underneath. I guess maybe I can just share how I have, and maybe that could be support conversations that you could take with the manager. I know for me, it's trying to just trust them to go uh, and to do what it needs to do. But I'm usually the last review of a lot of things. So rather than micromanaging in the moment, create a structure where there's a level of trust and empowerment and responsibility. But I tend to still do like a last read through of a PowerPoint presentation or a last read through of things on things that are really critical to move forward. And then use those moments to catch things or get it to the standard of excellence that I want or that I see, and use those as learning moments. And so we've tried to use it. And so my team knows me and I know them. And sometimes they'll be like, damn it, I thought that I had it right that time. Like, of course, like you got something. So, we're still in it and it's become more lighthearted around that. But I do, if I were to flip that and put myself onto the manager side, I mean, I think that I empower a lot of trust, but I am still trying to actually manage. My team is now 25 people, and we have grown 2.5, like, doubled, gone from 10 to 15 in about a year. So that's been a shift for me from the standard of excellence and how I want, and before you could touch everything. So I'm just going to layer onto this question that I'm actually still trying to navigate. How do I maintain that standard of excellence and that level of perfectionism that is somewhat innate in me? And but being able to let other people have their fingerprints on it, have that, because we're better because of it. We're better because of that diversity and that thinking in that group. But how do then I delicately, without making people feel overwhelmed or disappointed or failure or broken down, by being like, that was really good, but like, we need to be here. So I don't think I have a lot of advice. Hopefully Andrew can provide Amy with some real insight here, but I appreciate the question because it's providing some self-reflection with me and digging into, yeah, how do I do that and make sure that my people feel positive and empowered and ready to take on.
Yeah, before I jump in, go to you, Andrew, on that specific question. I think there's one thing as relates to, I love the comment around superpower. And, for me and doing a lot of work and reflecting about power. And I think we've often grown up in an idea that power is bad, when power is a thing. It's about how we use it. And for me, it's about the intentionality of that use is so critical. And I paint the picture often as you're figuring out our own power and what it is. Think about it like it's like a superhero where you're at the beginning of the movie, it's like blasting all over the place, creating havoc and damage. And at the end, they're like saving the planet. And to me, when you acknowledge it and integrate it into who you are and are trying as best as you can to be intentional with how you utilize it, it leans more that way. Damage can still happen, but it leans more that way. And so I think when we talk about any attributes, we need to recognize there's benefits and consequences to any of them. And so how do we use it and what's the context in which we can leverage it and be aware of like, oh, this is when it gets triggered and it starts to get a little uncontrolled. I think is the critical role of a leader. But Andrew, I don't know specifically if someone working with a manager over them, if you'd have some insights you'd want to add on that specific question as well.
Like, I guess the first thing I would just say is to acknowledge, like, Amy, this sucks. Like, and our manager is probably the biggest lever of our own engagement, well-being at work. Like, power plays a really substantial role in our lives, no matter who your boss is. So just to acknowledge that it's hard. Like, it's hard, and trying to find a way to stay resilient and positive is important. So that's one. The second thing that I would say is, the thing about being a manager is that you often get less and less feedback the higher up you go. And so if there is any way that you can provide that person with feedback, that's awesome. And specifically, to do that in a way that I think revolves really around three major things. One is trying to be just as transparent as you can be about just behaviors you're observing and what the impact those behaviors have on you. And the more transparent and non-judgmental you can be, but just like clear, like these are the things that I'm hearing you say and do, and this is what the impact of me is when you say and do those things. And then curiosity, like why? Like just assume that you don't have the answers about why that person is being micromanaging. And then compassion, like just also, right? Like they might be making your life hell, but at the same time, there's probably reasons why they're trying to do that, and they're human too. And maybe it's really uncomfortable to even have this conversation. So trying to approach it with compassion for them and what they might be going through, a kind of reverse of power in that kind of context actually gives you an enormous amount of power. And of course, not every situation is a situation where you can speak up, but if you can find a way, you might actually build an immense amount of trust with your manager by doing so.
Yeah, that's
Andrew,
really
that was
great.
awesome. I have to just say I really appreciate that. And I will just anchor on your point about feedback. I don't actually like you get it, you have to learn it and see it. You have to be a conscious leader, and the feedback isn't always verbal. And so you need to watch that feedback loop, but I've actually had to seek it out. So in our, annual biannual check-ins and in reviews, we call them performance alignment meetings rather than evaluations, just so that we're on the same page. But I've carved out space to say, you have to tell me something. And like have forced my direct reports to be able to give me feedback. I need to get better for you. Tell me, because they are not so quick. Notwithstanding, I work with my sister and she's very quick to tell me. But the others are not so much, not so much. And so I have to go and seek it. How am I being better? So I think you're right. I don't have somebody necessarily coming down and telling me that as you go higher up. So yeah, I really support your recommendation to have the courage to be able to have those conversations, and hopefully it has a positive outcome.
But I think it's also picking up on where like, an open door policy is not enough because it does not acknowledge the power
It's hard
dynamic.
conversations. It's hard to give feedback.
Yeah.
It's hard to receive
Yeah.
feedback, and it's hard to give it.
And the last thing I'll add, and I think there's an interesting question about curious to your answers about on this one. And maybe start with you, Andrew. But the last thing too, I think we forget that like when under threat, like in conditions that aren't safe, we're more likely to get stuck in like a fight, flight, freeze, and even a fawn response where we might create behaviors that give us the best likelihood to survive. And so, we've had some conversation with leader that fawn can look like an expression of interest or goodness. You see that come in multiple other places where it's like, it's actually, this is the safest mode for me to like cope with this scenario, which is really hard to think about as a leader to say like, again, how are we creating the conditions where that risk is not getting triggered as aggressively as it might in other settings. But Liv, do you want to set up that last question, and then we'll shift to closing out the day?
Yeah. Okay, what do the topics that were touched on today look like for someone that is neurodivergent in the workplace? How can we tailor our approach for those that may need more support around building resiliency, navigating through change, and them doing so while feeling psychologically safe? Andrew, that might be something, yeah, maybe you can start with.
I'm actually just going to reuse the exact same kind of answer I gave a little bit before. I think it's such a good question. Thank you so much for asking this question. And of course, there's 1,000 different ways, and there's an infinite number of ways that we can be neurodivergent in the workplace. And so I'm not going to assume that I know what that means, which is why I think we have to start with curiosity again, and transparency about what the experience is for the individual who is experiencing things, and compassion. And that compassion, I think, goes all the ways. But I think that if we assume that we don't have all the answers around how to treat somebody, anybody who we're encountering at work, and go in from a place of, hey, these are things that I'm observing in as behavioral terms as we can, and be as curious about what might be going on for the other person, and then have as much compassion as we possibly can for recognition that there's probably all sorts of things that we can't see below the waterline that might be happening. And if we can try to figure out how to do that together, I think it's kind of the only way to be able to cope with any kind of an accessibility issue that there might be at work.
That's a great answer. We have a tradition that we do where we have a couple of questions that are even unrelated or can be related to the topic of what we chatted about today that we always like to invite our guests to share. And one of those questions is, and maybe I'll start with you, Bree, as the person to respond first. What's the best piece of advice that's so good you need to tell us of, or the piece of advice that was so bad you need to warn us of, so that doesn't get perpetuated in the future?
I feel like I have a selective memory, of which most of my memory has been lost with like sleep deprivation of like motherhood the last 7 years. So like I don't remember very much that sticks. Like don't ask me to quote things, and then if I do, like no chance I'm gonna remember what the source was. Like just zero memory. But so I have a selective memory where I think I like cut out the bad stuff. Like I don't even hold
Cool.
grudges. Just like can't even remember why the grudge is there. Just keep it moving.
Yeah.
But I would say one of the best piece of advice, so simple, that I ever received, and it was on my first like proper job doing an internship during my MBA, and it was the CEO of a company, and I walked in, and I just, it was like my first like office corporate job. Prior to that, it was like coaching and babysitting type of things, or working at a restaurant. And I walked in, and the very first day, he sat me down and he said, "It's all about the people. Got it?" And I said, yeah. I was like 20 years old or something, or like super young. I was just like, got it. Okay, what's next? It's like, okay, you can go. And like that was my first meeting. That was it.
That's
And then
awesome.
I was like, where am I going now? And I think about him every single day. His name's Mike Connolly, and I think about him every day, because
Wow.
it's all about the people. And a lot of the leadership training, and learning that I'm trying to do isn't around conversation and communication and how we're using those, because nothing is done without people and relationships and communication in those relationships. And as I said, all of my greatest highs have been with the people, and all of my greatest lows have been because of people and the relationships and managing those. So I think that's the greatest advice that I've ever given, and I had no idea at the time. But here, almost 20 years later, it's still the thing I think about every day. So it's all about the people all the time.
Wow. That was awesome. Thanks, Bree. How about you, Andrew?
The guy who gave me this advice just passed away. And so I'm going to honor Alan Gordon, who, when I was in grade 11 and needed to do a career, like go pick the career that you want to be and go do some job shadowing with somebody who's in that job. I really wanted to be a theater producer. He was a theater and film producer. And I went and chatted with him. He's a friend of the family. And I was telling him about wanting to go to theater school. And he was like, I think that you should, if you want to go into theater, try to learn as much about as much as you possibly can. And
Mm,
that advice has shaped like everything that I have done in my life in so many different ways. It totally changed the direction of the university I was going to go to. It continue on a daily basis to try to learn as much as I possibly can about as much as I possibly can, and it has served me incredibly well. So thank you, Alan Gordon.
oh, awesome. That was awesome one too. And then last two, we often ask the previous guests to share a question for our next guest without knowing who they are. And the one I actually am going to ask both because I think they're both different, and I think it'd be fun to do both. The first one is, what's a belief you held strongly 5 years ago that you no longer hold on to today? And Andrew, I'm gonna ask you that one first, and then we'll let Brianna go after.
Simple answer, you can never have too much meaning in your life. I thought that was true 5 years ago. I definitely don't think that's true now.
Hmm. Interesting. I almost want to be like, tell me more, and let's do another hour. But I feel like you being mindful of time, we won't. But Brianna, how about you?
Geez, there's probably a few, and maybe these are like it's related, but I would say maybe going back to that perfectionist piece, like wanting to do everything top and like perfect, and being able to do all the things. Like you talked, Jesse, earlier about like feeling like invincible or infinite, and that's probably something that I might have held like 5 or so years ago, and now my children and my work and my life has humbled that, and being okay with good enough, and that we need progress right away, and even building a clean tech focused company. Like if we're going to wait for perfect solutions all the time, then we're it's going to be too long. And that really being able to move through and have good enough and transition and build upon that, and getting comfortable in that place of progress, and not letting that saying, don't let perfection get in the way of progress. Like that really, I think, has had to resonate, and being okay with lack of perfection, or being able to do all the things, or capacity for all of those things all the time. There's seasons in life, and there's seasons during the year, and that's just going to be what it is, and getting comfortable with it, thinking versus thinking, I can do all things. A
Yeah,
really
that's
good
great.
saying I would add on that our head scientist here, Roberto, says is, we can do anything, but we can't do everything at once.
Yeah.
And I think that to me is like the big takeaway.
Yeah, there's a futurist. I think it's Amy Webb that often talks about you can prepare for anything, but you can't do everything. That's same lens. That's awesome. And then the last question, and we'll start with you, Brianna. If you could be any animal, what would it be and why?
Honestly, I've been thinking about this, and there's a lot of animal talk in my house, like wild crats, like all day. So I know a lot of facts, and I was just, my favorite animal is a giraffe. It was just, I think it's so beautiful, but that wouldn't be what I would be. And I've been leaning towards an orca. Yeah, deep love for the oceans, and like just how they roll as a community. And there's also shark eating orcas, pretty cool. Um,
Yeah,
so I'm gonna go with an orca.
yeah. If your kids love wild krats, we came across this one on Apple TV called Jane.
Okay.
Amazing. It's basically like a live action version of Wild Kratts and like based on Jane Goodall's life.
Oh, incredible.
Where they
Need some new
like
content.
they
Need some new
imagine
content.
it like animals that are at risk and they solved it, and then they actually interview a scientist who's working in that field and teaching facts to kids of what they could do today to help be a conservationist.
Oh,
Anyways,
that's
super
that's my
awesome.
hot that's my hot tip. That's my hot tip.
Yeah, it's a hot tip. It's a real hot tip. Kids love it. Andrew, how about you?
This is a weird one because, again, I've been thinking about this one. I think that the answer is a coyote. But like it's a
Oh,
coyote because I don't know, in many indigenous cultures, certainly here in Mi'kmaq, like yeah, a coyote is a trickster, right? And tricksters, I think have a bad reputation, but they're the thing that challenge us to see below the surface. And tricksters, I think, can help us embrace uncertainty and mystery, and they reveal hidden strengths and insights. And I kind of love that idea. So I'm going to channel a
that's awesome.
trickster.
That's so good. I really, really thank you too for taking time for us today. The session was amazing, which I knew it was going to be, but thanks again for putting your effort and energies and willingness to be generous and share with us. This is our last episode of this season for folks that have been following along. Stay tuned over the course of the summer. You'll see some other content coming through as we prepare for next season with a new round of guests coming. So thanks so much for everyone who followed along, and thanks again to you two for giving your time to us so generously today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
Awesome. We'll see
you.
you later. Have a great day, everybody.